One Cowboys source says the Cowboys are desperately trying to trade inside the top 14. Who could that be for? And we will preview the 2022 NFL Draft with the Dallas Cowboys. All that and more in this episode of Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys. Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. Today's show is brought to you by Blue Nile. This Mother's Day, give mom something she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Cowboys listeners will get $50 off $500. Just use promo code Locked On at checkout. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. He is Landon McCool. Check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, we are almost here. We are one sleep away from the NFL draft. How you doing, buddy?
What's the old Disney commercial where they show the kids in the bed and I'm too excited to sleep. That's likely going to be us tonight. I mean, I think I think I've mentioned this before. There's a lot of stuff going on in my personal life and work life right now, but every once in a while it's like I remember that the draft is like less than 24 hours away. It's less than a week away, whatever the time frame was.
Yeah.
And it's like a little shot of adrenaline. So I'm certainly ready for this.
Yeah, so we've got a lot to talk about. The Cowboys had their pre-draft press conference yesterday, which you and I both watched. I mean, we could talk about it, but was there anything in there that you really thought was notable?
There were a couple of nuggets. I think some people they get lulled to sleep by Jerry Ease, and they kind of listen to it and then it's like, and they zone out and they sometimes you can miss some of the things that he says. I thought it was interesting, and we're going to talk about something along these lines a little bit. I thought it was interesting that when he started talking about trading up or trading down or trading around, and I think that some people may have missed this or maybe they didn't, but he seemed to specifically say, look, all of it happens when they reach out to us. Like, did you catch that? He basically implied that most of these situations with the trades, like they want to be in a situation where they are approached by a team as opposed to approaching another team. That's what I think he meant by that whole if you don't hear me, if you don't hear the phone ring and that's me calling comment, right? Is that they already laid the groundwork that, hey, if you guys are interested in trading back, if anyone's interested in trading back, we're here. And then they're waiting to see who calls them, which that's what they said. We may have had a report that kind of counteracts that, but I'm interesting to see how those two kind of ideas fit together.
Yeah, let's just get into it. Our guy Mike Fisher says right before we came on breaking, two NFL team sources, which probably are teams that the Cowboys have talked to right about a trade, say the Dallas Cowboys are trying to trade into the top 14 or so of the NFL draft. One source says the Cowboys are desperate to do so with one pinpointed target. It's important to remember that, again, our guy Fish, he covers quite a few different NFL teams. He's got great sources. So I'm sure he's hearing this not only from the Cowboys side of things, but from other teams that he happens to cover that maybe have the 13th pick in the draft and reside also in Texas, right? First of all, before we get to the player, do you buy this, that the Cowboys are trying to trade up?
Well, I mean, again, I think kind of going back to what Jerry said, I think they are certainly interested in teams that are desperate to trade back to come and make an offer to them that they can't refuse. I think that's why the wording of desperate for them to move up is a little bit counter to what they've said, right? And again, are they lying? Is the Houston person that the Houston source incorrect in the way?
Potentially
oh
Houston.
Yeah, potentially Houston. Sorry, potentially Houston. Is that source like just kind of misconstruing exactly the level of urgency here? That's what I don't know. But I do think that the Cowboys clearly, whether you believe one side or the other, it sounds like both sides would agree that the Cowboys have made inquiries as to what it would take to trade up. And I think we've heard pretty consistently that they have some people in mind, and this report seems to say that it's one person in mind that they would be going up to get if that specific person fell to a spot that they could get up to.
And it really makes sense when you think about what Stephen Jones said yesterday about how the first and second round of this draft are pretty shallow, right? And I just don't think they want to get to a spot where, hey, if we stay at 24 and 56, we're just taking second and third round guys. Like, we'd rather just use those picks and go get a bona fide first round player. Who is that player? I don't know. If you had to make a guess on who the Cowboys are pinpointing at, let's say 12, 13, 14, who would you say?
I'm not gonna break any news with any of these names. These are all names that we've talked about. It's Cross, it's Thibodeau, it's, I would say, Evan Neal. For me personally, I don't know how they feel about him. I think the other name that we need to throw out here, just because I keep hearing it associated with this trade up, conversation, and this may just be smoke, is Drake London. They did bring him in for a 30 visit. We all kind of, scratched our head a little bit when we saw his name and Charles Cross, simply because, well, we weren't exactly sure how much of a scheme fit for what he does. He is. And also his draft stock is significantly higher than where the Cowboys draft. So I have to think that he's someone that they are considering simply because he's on the 30 visit. We've heard a little bit of rumblings here. And maybe the thought process is you get Drake London and they can use CeeDee Lamb more in the slot. Maybe they're kind of going opposite of what we've been speculating. Maybe they want to move him around a little bit more, and they need someone more solid on the outside to pair with Michael Gallup.
Or you make London your slot receiver. See, that's the part that, to me, that I thought about today. It's, okay, I have concerns if you have to play London on the outside because he doesn't have long speed. Like, he just doesn't have it. His quickness it's okay actually for a guy of his size.
It's pretty good for a guy his size. He could separate. That's not an issue like it is like some of those other big guys.
So if the plan is to keep CeeDee Lamb on the outside, we know Michael Gallup is an outside receiver. Could you use London like a kind of almost like a tight end out of the slot? I mean, I think he's a pretty good blocker too, but he's not. I mean, you're not lining him up in line, but could he do some middle of the field stuff, some of the deep routes that the Cowboys like to use in the middle of the field to be that seam stretcher? Maybe I could actually see him, and a couple people compared him to Keenan Allen today. I could see him having a Keenan Allen-like impact from the slot.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think he's, it's very easy to watch some highlights of him and kind of write him off as that typical big body non-separator that is going to win high point balls that normally I would say you should avoid, right? Because those guys don't always translate in the NFL. If you can't get open in college, you're not going to be able to get open in the NFL. And the guys are more physical. The cornerbacks are more physical, so you're not going to have the high rate of success that you did in college on contested catches. That's just not translatable. And thank you, the Eagles, for Arcega-Whiteside. And I think London is a guy that kind of gets put into that bucket despite his game not being like that. He does have separation ability. He does get out of his breaks really well. He does sink his hips and change direction well. I agree that he probably doesn't have great long speed. You kind of see that on tape, and obviously by the fact that he didn't want to get to a 40 time, that kind of indicates that. But I think that if you're talking about putting him in the slot, big slots are all the rage now. And I think that that's kind of going back towards more of what they're looking. And I think that's the same thought process there with Treylon Burks, right? Is that you would use him a ton in the slot early on with, slowly kind of moving his way outwards. Can I just make one more point real quick about the trade up to Drake London? I think the other thing other angle of this that we haven't discussed, that we haven't talked about, is the super seniors in this class that are coming out. Now, they talked about it in the press conference yesterday that the draft is not very deep. I mean, it's not very thick at the top. It's very deep. And it's very deep because you've got all these 2 years of guys who have been waiting that weren't, the elite of the elite that were going to be drafted, their junior and redshirt sophomore years that are now coming out. So there's this huge glut of players that are kind of the middle class of what will eventually be the middle class of the NFL that are coming out that will be available in the 5th round. And I think what that'll end up doing is that'll make your undrafted free agent class really strong. What does this have to do with Drake London? I think the idea of trading up is made a lot more palatable if you feel like you can get better quality players that can actually contribute later in the draft than you normally would. And I think that makes the whole process a little bit easier to swallow if you have to give up a pick to go up and get someone like him.
I think they believe that we have 4 5th-round picks. 2 of those guys can make the roster and be contributors this year, right? But in most years, those 5th-round picks don't make the team. I wouldn't be surprised if they think, hey, our linebacker depth isn't great, but if we just wait to the 5th round, we'll grab somebody there. We need another cornerback. Let's wait till the 5th round. We can grab somebody there. So go up and get a guy that you grade as a top 10 player. I'm just not convinced it's Drake London. I think
that's totally fair.
My guess, and listen, I could be totally wrong. It sounds like they do have interest in Drake London. He was a 30 visit. There's just something about that one that doesn't make a ton of sense to me, and it makes me a little suspicious. But there is a guy that I think makes more sense for them around that same range. And I want to talk about him, but let's take a quick break. That's a tease for you guys.
Excellent tease.
Let's tell you guys about Blue Nile. Are you looking for some fine jewelry for that special woman in your life, but having trouble choosing? Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7, available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every single budget. And trust me, I'm going to need Blue Nile's help after this weekend when I have 30 people over in my house all weekend long, and my wife is having to do everything. You need to go to BlueNile.com. You can easily navigate through thousands of fine jewelry options at every single price point. And this Mother's Day, give mom something she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Cowboys listeners will get $50 off $500. This podcast exclusive is only good through Mother's Day. Just make sure you're using promo code Locked On. That is promo code Locked On. All right.
My wife's definitely going to need some Blue Nile.
Yeah.
After everything that happens.
Our poor wives this weekend. They get abandoned, and it's
absolute queens. Right.
So if the Cowboys trade up inside the top 14, I still think offensive line is a spot they're more likely to look at. And we'll see if Cross falls. Maybe somebody like Evan Neal falls a little bit. I saw today, he's falling to 9 and 10 in some mocks. I still think if he ridiculous. Falls that far, go do that. But the one non-offensive lineman that I think makes the most sense is Jamison Williams, because the one thing the Cowboys lacked at receiver, not only last year, but over the last several years, is speed. They just don't have anybody that can stretch the field vertically that makes teams nervous, right? Michael Gallup doesn't have that. CeeDee Lamb is a fantastic player, but he doesn't have that. I think Jamison Williams is the guy. Plus, we've heard some reports from Charles Robinson that the Cowboys have done a lot of work. It just feels like that's the guy that makes more sense for the offense.
Here's hoping. That's definitely my choice. That's the guy I want. Look, the Drake London thing, you're kind of you're putting pieces together, right? You hear whispers. He was on the 30 visit. You're totally right. The reason we haven't discussed him as much is because to us, as far as a fit for what the Cowboys offense already has, it doesn't make a ton of sense. How different is he than what you have in CeeDee Lamb? How different is he than what you have in Michael Gallup? He's definitely a slower version of what Amari Cooper is at the very least, and not the same route runner. I think if you're trying to get better, you're trying to diversify your wide receiver room, you're trying to add speed to this offense, Jamison Williams immediately does that. Jamison Williams immediately adds that to your offense. I think Olave would have a similar-ish effect, but again, there's a reason that I think that Williamson is the best fit for this team. I've said it since we've talked about wide receivers. That speed, that ability to take the ball and just be a threat, and even without the ball, just to kind of make the safeties play back because he's on the field, that's going to open things up all over this offense in a way that it felt like at the end of the year, things were getting very congested in the passing game.
Yep.
I think a guy like Jamison Williams will take the top off of it and open things up underneath for guys like Gallup, Schultz, and not Cooper, Lamb.
No, it still hurts. You mentioned Chris Olave. I just sent out a tweet before we came on. That's the wish for me at 24. And if it takes a small trade up, I would be happy with that. But if you're trading up inside the top 14, I think Williams has to be the target because he just has something that the rest of the offense doesn't have and something they really need. And I know there's some concerns about, okay, you'd be trading for a receiver coming off an ACL when you just paid a receiver coming off an ACL injury. I just don't worry about September that much anymore, Landon. Like, it's not a big deal, right? Like, you're drafting this guy in the first round with the idea of he's on our team for the next 5 years. What's he going to be like in 2023, in 2024? I'm just not concerned about what preseason looks like for the Cowboys or even what week 1, week 2, week 3 looks like. It's just not a big deal to me.
Let's just say this. In the modern NFL era, especially in a 17-game season and the last 5 to 6 years, week 1, week 2, week 3,
never been more meaningless.
They are the preseason.
Yeah.
Like most teams are dealing, that whole idea of going 0-3 and not making the playoffs. I don't know that applies anymore just because there's so much more room to make up that distance. The disparity is what way it is. I think, look, not that I think
there's an extra wild card spot. That's the other thing that we forget. There's one extra team making the playoffs every year.
So my point is not that you should just sacrifice those games or anything like that. No. But the point is that you don't make long-term plans based on 3 weeks out of a potential 4 to 5 year career.
Especially for a rookie, right? Like,
yeah,
the first 3 weeks of a rookie's career are the most meaningless of the 5-year rookie contract, right? Like,
even if he was healthy, like what's the expectation for a rookie wide receiver, right?
Right. So I mean, now you can make an argument. Well, Williams might be up to speed by the time the season goes on, and this is really more of a play for 2023. That's fine. All the Cowboys moves this offseason have indicated that they're looking ahead to 2023 anyways, right?
I mean, I don't think it's going to take all of training camp to tell Jamison Williams and, hey, go run down the field and run a 9 route. Hey, take this reverse, take this jet sweep. I think the things that you're asking a guy like Williams to do don't necessarily require a bunch of nuance up front. And he can learn the nuance as he's toasting corners on the outside and stretching the field with the safeties.
And if you need a receiver to get you through the first 6 weeks of the season, hypothetically, why don't you just go grab another Alabama free agent that has some ties with Dan Quinn?
Julio Jones. Let's do it.
That's not a bad. Honestly, I've been thinking about this more and more. Like, once we get past the draft, and let's say the Cowboys do get Jamison Williams, that one makes a lot of sense. Like, bring Julio in. You know that he's not going to stay healthy for the whole year, and that's fine. You don't need him to. You just need him to help you get off to a fast start.
I agree. I mean, I think that all kind of makes sense. Obviously, Marcus and I had spoken previously about the Julio Jones thing. That's why that came by quickly. But I think it makes a ton of sense. I mean, it's just, again, what you don't want to rely on Julio Jones is to be your number 1 wide receiver throughout the year. No. If you can basically rent him for the first few weeks and then, maybe even have him at the end of the year too, now you're cooking with gas.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about what we expect the Cowboys to do tomorrow. Do we expect them to be aggressive? Because I think at this point, Landon, I will be shocked if they pick at 24. I just will be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that seems right. I think that the talk has been at an all-time high as far as the potential of them trading. I think I don't know that we've heard of them, throwing chum. Like they said, they always throw chum in the water. But I think that we've heard a lot more smoke about them trading this year than I feel like we have in any year. So yeah. I think that they understand what kind of free agency offseason they've had so far. I think they want to make a big splash. So I would not at all be surprised. I think they'll be smart about it. I don't think they're just going to trade up for any reason. I think.
Well, I think they really trust their scouting staff. I think they trust that they can not only get the player right in round 1, but hey, if we get to day 3 and we need to go get a couple guys that can contribute, they can do that. In fact, they've been better drafting on day 3 than they have on day 2 the last 5-6 years anyways, right? So, hey, if we have to burn a second-round pick to move up 10 spots, we're fine with that. We feel good about what we can do the rest of the way.
second and third rounds where they've taken their risks. They take their big swings. They like to take their first round players that have something wrong with them that made them fall to the second round. And that's why they take those risks. And part of that is, like we said, they feel confident about their ability to find players later in this draft and later in any draft, and especially this draft, I would have to think, because of how deep it is at the bottom.
Any other just general thoughts about what the Cowboys probably are going to try to do tomorrow?
I've been getting lots of calls from friends, and they're asking me who they think that, the Cowboys are going to be picking. At this point, it's still like, if I'm a betting man, it's still hard not to say Kenyon Green or something.
That's why I keep saying if they stay at 24, I would almost be shocked if it's anybody else.
I am predicting something unpredictable as my choice. But if I have to predict something, then I'm predicting the predictable of them taking Kenyon Green. I tend to think that the chances of them staying at 24 and picking a player are probably less than them doing anything else, right? Than trading up or down. But we'll see. I mean, again, it's not even necessarily their choice. It's not like, oh, they've made this decision and this is what they're going to do. I think they have several different scenarios that they will react to and then make the decision. So, that's why you don't make this trade right now, is because you don't know the way the board is going to fall. If the board falls a certain way, I have no doubts that they'll go up and get the player that they're targeting. And if it doesn't, I have no doubts that they'll either pick someone at 24 that they like, or potentially try to trade back and figure out a way to get someone they like while picking up a few extra picks.
I just want to make one more note that picks 12, 13, and 14, that's the Vikings, that's the Texans, and that's the Ravens. The Vikings have a new general manager who comes from the Andrew Berry school of trade back, trade back, trade back. Nick Caserio comes from New England, trade back, trade back, trade back. And then you've got the Ravens, who are the king of trading back, right? And those teams aren't afraid to take, on the surface, a lesser value trade to move back because they understand the value of stockpiling picks. That's why I think you're hearing top 14 is because there's 3 teams there that probably would love to move back and add a bunch of picks. So, go ahead.
I'll just add, the fact that you have 3 of them means that Jerry can play the 3 against each other to try to get the best deal. Well, that sounds like a good deal, but I got Houston on the line, and they're willing to do it with for less than that. No. So I think that's why, even more so, we talked about the value of trading up is going to be less expensive than it probably would be in normal years.
Absolutely. So keep an eye on that. I'm going to be really interested. There's a couple guys that I'm rooting for to fall, just like to the 9-10 area, just to see if the Cowboys would trade up. But yeah, I think once we get to 11-12, that's when things are going to start heating up. So make sure at that point of the draft, you're glued to your chair, because I don't think you can afford to just sit and wait for the Cowboys to pick at 24. All right, we've got one more fun segment that we're going to do before we head out. But before we do that, I want to tell you guys about Built Bar. This time of year, almost everybody has given up on their New Year's resolutions, but not us. We are sticking to ours to eat better and eat right, thanks to Built Bar. And it's because it's not really all that hard to do. Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, and you can guarantee that I'll have about 5 of them sitting next to me during the draft as I'm nervously eating. Built Bars contain only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to your average candy bar, and it's not even a contest. So go to Built.com and use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right. One of our partners here on the Locked On Cowboys podcast is Bet Online, and they've sent us some odds to talk about. So we're going to run through a bunch of these. These are some over-unders on players, just some that are Cowboy-related guys, some that aren't. And I just want your thoughts, Landon, since you are a degenerate gambler, from what I've heard.
Yeah.
So are you ready? Let's do these rapid fire. Okay. So
absolutely, yeah.
Just to be clear, we'll start with like Ahmad Gardner. His over-under is 5.5. If you're saying over, you think he's going to get picked at 6, 7, 8. If you say under, he's going to be picked 1, 2, 3, 4. Pretty easy. So Sauce Gardner, 5.5.
Under. I think he might go a little bit higher than that. Teams are really liking him, it sounds like.
I would agree with you. Arnold Ebiketie seems like that's somebody that people have really started to like. 32.5.
Shout out to John Owning for making this guy a first rounder basically by himself. I'm gonna I'm going to take the under, I think.
Yeah.
The 32, that's a good number, honestly, because I think that's right where he'll go.
Bernard Reinman, the offensive tackle from Central Michigan, 39.5.
Oh, 39. Wow, that's a good number.
See, that's a guy that I would trade up for if he's around that area.
They're good at this.
I know.
Push? Can I say push? I think 39 might be where it's picked, right?
I'll say slightly under just because offensive tackles go early. But yeah, I like Reinman a lot.
Yeah.
Charles Cross, 6.5.
I'm gonna go over. I think. I think there's some teams that are concerned about him coming from an air raid offense, and he doesn't quite get his hips low as you'd like. That may be what's driving his slide down the boards.
Chris Olave, 16.
My heart says over.
We want him to be over.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say under. There's too much about his game that you like.
I'm going to say over. I think that not despite the fact that he's my number one receiver in this class, I think that some teams are viewing him as wide receiver 2 and not someone necessarily special. And I think lots of teams are making mistakes.
Derek Stingley, we got him at 6 or 7.5.
I think it's under.
I think somebody's going to pick him high.
Yeah. I think that's it.
Devin Lloyd, 19.5. I would say way over. I don't see him going in the top 20.
I don't either. Yeah, over.
Devontae Wyatt, 29.5. Feels pretty low, but I know there's some off the field stuff.
There's some off the field stuff that we're starting to hear whispers about. So I do wonder if it might be. I'm going to take the over. Over. I'm taking the over.
Drake London, 11.5.
I think I'm taking the under. I think he probably goes at 10.
Yeah, it feels like 10 is a good spot for him. We'll see. Evan Neal, 6.
Under, I think. I mean, if it makes sense. We're hearing something about a knee and a shoulder, I think, for him. But I think that might be attempts to get him to go lower.
If you go under, if he goes to the Panthers at 6, that's a push, right? So you get your money back. I think there's a chance he goes 5 to the Giants. I think that's a good one. All right, a couple other Cowboy-related ones. What do you think about Jamison Williams, 11.5?
What was Olave's?
16.
I think it's over. I think he, likely goes in that 12 or 13 range, or I think it's just past that.
Yeah. Zion Johnson, 24.5. I would say under pretty comfortably there, because I think he either goes to New England at 21, Arizona at 23.
Arizona, yeah. 24. I would take that under if I was a gambling degenerate.
Treylon Burks, 23.5.
He's a tough one because I think teams are going to see him wildly different.
Yeah, I would say over.
What was it? 28?
23.5.
23. Yeah, I'll take the over on that.
Quay Walker, 32.5.
Under, baby, all day long. Give me that.
I mean, if you guys can't tell, there might have been some wagering here by Landon.
I may have. Marcus calls me a degenerate gambler, despite the fact that I made my first bet in probably a decade last week, and I took Quay Walker to go in the first round. So just everybody get your bets in there if you're trying to follow my lead.
All right, that is it for today's show. We need to plug tonight's show that we're doing.
Yes.
We'll do one last mock draft simulator. I'm sure there'll be some draft tidbits and nuggets that come out between now and then. So make sure you guys tune into that. We'll try to maybe run through a couple scenarios that the Cowboys could potentially see happen on Thursday. And then Landon, it's draft time, buddy. In what?
Pop in the VHS, hours? Marcus. You got to see some what's his name?
Draft day. I got to see Kevin Costner. Oh, I'm so excited. Every draft day morning I watch it. It gets me so excited.
I can't wait to see that live tweet. Guys, make sure you check us out tonight. It's 6 p.m. Pacific, yes. 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern on the Locked On YouTube channel. We will be there ready to go through a simulator. It'll be a lot of fun like it was last time. And we're going to do a show after the draft on Thursday. That'll be out
late Thursday night, early Friday morning, so you guys can hear us live react to the Cowboys picks and the trade up that they might or might not make. We'll see. But follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube. Again, Locked On Cowboys over there. Follow Landon at McCool BCB. You can follow me at Marcus_Mosher. We'll see you guys tonight. Bye, everybody.